On Sunday, November 14th this year, we had an unfortunate incident during our Sunday morning service when the online access to the service was attacked by a Zoom bomber posting inappropriate content and disrupting the ability of people to watch the service. Our tech team did a wonderful job of gently escorting this person out the electronic door and getting everything running again. But one side effect was that we did not create a recording of the service. And since some people do watch the recorded services, and since Veterans Day is a day of some significance to people in the church, we thought we would record the readings and the sermon as close as we can to what was actually said in the church on Sunday morning. So let's go. Our first reading on Sunday describes what veterans would like to accomplish amidst the horrors of war and why people of faith, followers of great teachers of peace, might believe that we still need veterans. In this excerpt from her memoir, Gerda Weissman describes meeting a stranger on May 7th, 1945. One day short of her 21st birthday, she had endured 3 years in concentration camps. She had just stepped outside the building where she was living with hundreds of other imprisoned women. If you've heard her speak, you know how eloquent she can be. I won't try to emulate her style here, but I will try to share her words with you. I saw a strange car coming down the hill, not bearing the swastika, but a white star. 2 men sort of jumped out. One came toward where I stood. He was wearing dark glasses, and he spoke to me in German. And he said, "Does anybody here speak German or English?" And I said, "I speak German." I felt that I had to tell him who we were. I was a little afraid to tell him, but I said to him, "We are Jewish, you know." He didn't answer me for quite a while, and then his own voice sort of betrayed his own emotion, and he said, "So am I." And then he asked an incredible question. He said, "May I see the other ladies?" To know what we had been called for 6 years and then to hear this man, I have to tell you, I weighed 68 pounds, my hair was white, and you can imagine I hadn't had a bath in years. And this creature asked for the other ladies. I told him that most of the girls were inside, they were too ill to walk. And he said, "Won't you come with me?" And I said, "Sure." He held the door open for me and let me precede him. And in that gesture, restored me to humanity. Our second reading is a radio message sent by Michael Day, a young Coast Guard officer who has been ordered by his commander to hitch a ride on the New York Port Authority pilot boat to see what is actually happening amid confusing reports of an emergency near the south end of Manhattan Island. His orders are to observe and report. He has seen that both towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. The island is shrouded in an apocalyptic cloud of smoke and dust. The waterfront is swarming with thousands of people seeking to escape, and more are emerging out of the smoke. Day discovers that he can't contact his superiors. He reaches for the VHF radio on the pilot boat, punches in channel 16 and says, "All available boats. This is the United States Coast Guard. Anyone wanting to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan, report to Governor's Island." Veterans Day was a different kind of day when there were more veterans in Lincoln. When we joined this church, there were quite a few members of the so-called greatest generation who had come of age just in time to have years of their lives disrupted by the Second World War. Their stories appear on page after page of Clear Windows, the history of our church, which was published in 1992 to mark the 50th anniversary of the founding of the modern First Parish. Limited to 1 paragraph per person, they told intriguing tales. Len Moss, who had joined the Boston Symphony Orchestra after the war, was fighting his way up the Italian peninsula, thinking that both his location and the risks he was taking were unknown to his wife, Fran. He would find out after the war that she had been recruited to join the many musicians who turned out to have a natural talent for cracking codes. She was decrypting the radio traffic sent by the German and Italian high commands and knew exactly where Len's outfit was every day. 50 years later, I accidentally used a technical term from code breaking in a church committee meeting. Fran came up to me afterward to reveal our shared backgrounds and to tease me about leaking what had once been a secret word. Dave and Pat Garrison met while serving in an Army field hospital in France and were married there. Her paragraph mentions that they were married in French. I suspect that they flouted Army fraternization regulations and found a priest or a civil registrar in the nearest village to preside over their somewhat illegal nuptials. On the other side of the planet, Elliot Hubbard reported laconically, met Margaret Hubbard during submarine attack in January 1942. Equally laconic and economical in her use of punctuation, she wrote 1942, married perfect spouse, period. I don't mean to imply that one of the worst experiences in the history of the human race was a series of romantic comedies or to glorify war. All three of these couples were proud of their service, but also active in peace and social justice initiatives when they lived in Lincoln. But there is something in their stories and in the way they are told that is worthy of our attention today. Without losing sight of the Fifth Commandment or the Sermon on the Mount, how do we harvest the good and the useful from the experiences of our veterans? This morning, I offer 3 ways in which something good could come from our reflections on Veterans Day. First, in our worship and our actions as a community, we need to hold our nation to a high standard. Possessing the awful power to wage war, do we use it wisely? If we are going to have veterans, can we strive to ensure that their sacrifice was both necessary and effective? Gerda Weissman learned after the war that she was the only survivor of her family, and that the Jewish community where she had grown up in Poland had been obliterated. She married Kurt Klein, that young American officer who had greeted her so politely, and moved to Kenmore, New York. In 2011, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama for her work in telling the story of the Holocaust to a global audience. That's a good ending to a horrible story, but there was an edge to her message. Did 11 million innocent people have to die before Allied forces reached the death camps? What could advocates for justice and tolerance have done when it became apparent that a fascist ideology was spreading across Europe? I wonder, what was said from our pulpit at a time when isolationism was a popular point of view in New England? Could a small show of determination in 1935 have prevented a global war 4 years later? On the other hand, in so many cases, one wonders why there was even a disagreement, much less a war between countries. Can we as a community seek to foster the peaceful resolution of our world's disputes? Second, when we have asked our young men and women to serve in dangerous circumstances, we do have a widely shared belief that we need to care for those who come home hurting in body or spirit. But can we go farther by ensuring that we are a people worth defending, a society that lives up to its high ideals? Patriotism has a way of inciting us to paper over our internal sins. This can be dangerous. I can't forget Walt Kelly's comment in the Pogo comic strip, "We have met the enemy and he is us." Our opening hymn today is an example of this risk. I love America the Beautiful, which was beautifully sung today, but I fear that it has slowly lost its meaning. The original lyrics were written by Wellesley College professor Catherine Lee Bates during a 4th of July picnic in 1893 on the summit of Pikes Peak. She really could see purple mountains and waving fields of grain. There's no fiction in her description. But she had grown up surrounded by her version of the greatest generation, the 2 million men who had fought to preserve the Union and end slavery. She was concerned, even angry, at the reimposition of racist laws and practices in the former Confederacy and the beginning of the era of Jim Crow rules. She viewed this as a betrayal of the greatest generation of her time. On top of that, the concentration of wealth in the hands of the so-called robber barons and irrational speculation on the stock market had led to the Panic of 1893, in which unwise investments had led to bank failures and widespread mortgage foreclosures. Thank God that doesn't happen anymore. But let's listen to that third verse as it appears in hymnals in 2021 and as she wrote it. Here are the words that we heard today. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness and every gain divine. And here's what she wrote in 1893. Oh, great for glory tale of liberating strife, where once or twice for man's avail, men lavished precious life. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, till selfish gain no longer stain the banner of the free. This is similar to the treatment that we have given to Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, which was also a song of protest, but is now sort of a happy, clappy summer camp favorite. Bates was having what William Sloane Coffin, himself a veteran, stood in our pulpit and called a lover's quarrel with America. Can we, in pursuit of justice, fairness, and opportunity for all, honor our veterans by making their service worthwhile? So, if we help identify the small number of situations in which force is the least bad of our bad options, and we work to make our nation worth defending, I have one more suggestion, and it was inspired by the story of that radio message on 9/11. I learned about it from the documentary film Boat Lift, narrated by Tom Hanks. It's only 12 minutes long. It's available for free on YouTube. I recommend it. Anyone who has ever had to make a big decision in the absence of the boss can relate to Michael Day's dilemma. He heard on a commercial radio station that all bridges and tunnels out of Manhattan had been closed. People were already jumping in the water to try to swim to Brooklyn. So Lieutenant Day, unable to kick the problem up to his boss and acting without legal authority, commissioned the largest maritime evacuation in history. Over 150 ships and boats of all sizes and shapes, ranging from the Staten Island ferry to tugboats and cocktail party sightseeing cruisers, checked in at Governor's Island in the middle of New York Harbor, and then headed toward trouble, away from safety, repeatedly, until 500,000 people had been evacuated by sunset. This is more people in one day than the 300,000 who were evacuated from Dunkirk in the famous Dunkirk boat lift, which took a week. This was a radical act of service, radical in that Lieutenant Day asked for it, and radical in that so many responded. Returning to our own friends and neighbors telling their stories in clear windows, it has become apparent that, to me, the most broadly relevant thing about their tales is not that they fought against fascism, but they gave away scarce, irreplaceable years of their lives in places where they didn't want to be, doing things they didn't want to do for the benefit of people they didn't know. In their conversations, they often referred to those years as their time in the service. Theirs is an example of radical service. If they could do that, how should we, in an era of self-centered careerism and economic anxiety, respond to a covenant in which we pledge to unite for the service of all? What if we thought of that as a pledge both to the service of all and to service by all? I know that this is a church full of people who serve, but just as a hypothetical question, what would radical service look like for us? There are examples among us, but for all of us, what's the equivalent of all available votes? For some of us, it will continue to be military service. I don't regret my 5 years of active duty and 25 years in the Navy Reserve. I'm looking to my right at Tom Risser and remembering how scared I was as he and I weathered a typhoon in the East China Sea so many years ago. I can also see someone sitting in the back row who's still serving today. But can we help to create new ways for people of all skills and inclinations to overcome the economic and organizational barriers to spending serious time and energy in the service of all? There are barriers. For example, we have come to understand at Babson College, where I teach, that affluent young people can afford a year or two of service, but many others need to be earning serious money while they are students and must finish their educations quickly in order to support their extended families. What could be accomplished if every American could, at some point in life, invest a year or two of full-time service? That would be a really cool thing for a church to help invent. Wise use of force, a nation worth defending, and the practice of radical service. These sound like pretty good ways to thank our veterans.